Today will be part 34 to the series Scriptures Often Ignored. And today we're going to be talking about the spiritual David and Goliath. Now, I'm sure many of us have heard of this story and are very familiar with the story of David and Goliath, but we're really going to be talking more specifically about how this story can relate to us today and even in our personal lives. And that's why we're here in 1 Samuel or Shamuel chapter 16, and we're going to be reading verses 7, and then we're going to be reading the actual story in chapter 17. And because this is a truth network, we use the restored set apart Hebrew names for our father Yahuwah and his true son, his Messiah Yahusha. And verse 7 says, "But Yahuwah said unto Shamuel or Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For Yahuwah seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but Yahuwah looketh on the heart." And of course, this is talking about Jesse, who is the father of David or David. And this is, of course, talking about the different sons of Jesse and how Yahuwah has chosen David to be king of Yashraal even early on. And this talks about sort of how he chose it and how Shamuel or Samuel anoints David. But isn't it amazing how Yahuwah makes his decisions not based on how the world makes the decisions on others, like evaluating for a job interview or job application, but how Yahuwah looks on the heart and looks on the inward appearances. And that's exactly what Yahuwah is looking for, because remember, as we talked about last week, obedience sure is better than sacrifice. And like I said, today we're really going to be focusing on how the story of David and Goliath applies today, spiritually speaking, and how the righteous are really, they symbolize a sort of David, and how everything that's going on in the world around you could represent Goliath. And we're going to talk about some more spiritual Goliaths in a second to come. But before we do, we're actually going to go over the chapter together right now. And so we're going to be reading 1 Samuel chapter 17 verses 1 through 50 together. And it says, "Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shahak," and sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, "which belonged to Yahudah or Judah, and pitched between Shahah and Azekah in Damim. And Saul or Shaul and the men of Yashraal or Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel or Yashraal stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span." So he was very tall indeed. Sounds like a giant to me, but let's keep going. "And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with the coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass." So wow, very, very, very powerful armor. "And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him." Verse 8 says, "And he stood and cried unto the armies of Yashraal or Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Shaul or Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us." So we see the parameters that are set here, and we see what is offered and what's at the table here from Goliath himself. Then it says, "And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Yashraal or Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." Verse 11 goes on to say, "When Saul and all of Yashraal or Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid," because remember, Goliath was in fact the giant. He was much bigger than all of them. But let's keep going. "Now David or David was the son of that Aphrodite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And the man went among men for an old man in the days of Shaul or Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse Jesse went and followed Shaul or Saul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And Dawid was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Shaul or Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. And I love how we see 40 days all throughout Scripture, including with 40 days and 40 nights with Musha and Moses being in, of course, the mount with our father Yahuwah, receiving the law, statutes, and commandments, as well as the fasting of our Messiah Yahusha for 40 days and 40 nights. So we see that theme recurrent all throughout Scripture itself. Now verses 17 says, And Jesse said unto Dawid, or David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Shaul or Saul and they and all the men of Yashrael or Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Yashrael or Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Yashrael or Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Yashrael or Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Yashrael or Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living Elohim? And another way to say Elohim is Allahim. And then verse 27 says, And the people answered after him this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him, Salakia. And Eliab his eldest brother heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against Dawid or David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he returned from them toward another, and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which Dawid or David spake, they rehearsed them before Shaul, Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Now listen to this. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And maybe you're going through that spiritually. Maybe you're constantly having people tell you that you'll never amount to anything, that you'll never make it, that you'll never do it, that you'll never be anyone. But is that the truth? Remember, let the word of our Father be true, and let every man be a lie. Because here in verse 34, David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and he took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defiled the armies of the living Elohim. And maybe you're dealing with some uncircumcised people in your life who are uncircumcised to the truth of our Father Yahuwah and his true Son, the Messiah Yahusha, as well as the Torah. Maybe you're going through this too in just a different way, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. But I just love this part the most in verse 37 where it says, David said, moreover, Yahuwah that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and Yahuwah be with thee. And see, that's what we have to remember, because what is the main difference between David and Goliath? Well, Yahuwah was for David and Yahuwah was with David, but Yahuwah was not with Goliath. And maybe you're going through that too, even to this day. And now verse 38 says, and Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with the coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And verse 41 says, and the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. But the question is, are these living gods? Are they the living Elohim? Of course they are not. Then verse 44 says, and the Philistine said unto David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with the sword, and with the spear, and with the shield. But I come to thee in the name of Yahuwah Tsabuah, also known as Yahuwah of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Yashrael or Israel, whom thou hast defied. And I have to ask you this question, who do you come in the name of? Do you come in the name of our Father Yahuwah? Because there may be people who are coming to you with spiritual swords and spiritual spears. They're coming to you with name calling, and they're coming to you with all types of attacks. But see, when you're able to put on the whole armor of our Father Yahuwah, just as Ephesians 6 instructs, then you know you have nothing to worry about, just like David. And it says, verse 46, this day will Yahuwah deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a Elohim in Yashrael or Israel. And all this assembly shall know that Yahuwah saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahuwah's, and he will give you into our hands. And what's also interesting is that this verse automatically reminded me of Moses and Musha, and how every time he had his hands lifted up unto Yahuwah, every time Moses lifted his hands up, Yahuwah delivered them out of the hands of their enemies, and Yahuwah delivered the children of Israel out from their oppression and all of their enemies, as we see once again here, and as we will see in times to come. Verse 48 says, and it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And then what does David do? And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with the stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. But what's very good about this story is that it not only applies back then, but it even applies today, because we know that David, spiritually speaking, represents the righteous of Yashrael, those who are following the law, statutes, and commandments of our Father Yahuwah, and have accepted our blood perfect Passover lamb, Yahusha, the real Messiah, into our hearts. But we also know that we're always dealing with spiritual Goliaths too, and the way that we may be dealing with them is maybe on our job, maybe in our household, maybe from certain old family members, maybe old friends. Maybe you're dealing with Goliaths in the people that you encounter every single day, because we know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and we know that there are many demons that are lurking around and lurking about indeed. But not only that, but we also know that there are many spiritual Goliaths. Just look at your government, and just look at what your government's about to do, and the plans of the New World Order, and what they're doing, and the elite at the very top. But see, we know when we put on the whole armor of our Father Yahuwah, and when we put on his armor, we know that we are guarded, we know that we are armed, and we know that we do not even have to worry whatsoever. Because when we put on his armor and his whole armor, and when we take his sword of the Ruach, his sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahuwah, which is his word, because we know that his word is true, once we do that, we know that we can combat and face all the fiery darts of the wicked, and we know that we're able to stand in that evil day and fight off all of our enemies, not only physically, but also mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even psychologically. And maybe you're dealing with several Goliaths in your life right now. Maybe you're dealing with several Goliaths today. And maybe you're dealing with all of the stress and all of the pain and all of the neglect and all of the abuse. And maybe you're dealing with certain things that are not just have to do with people in your lives that represent the spiritual Goliath, but also different emotions and different familiar spirits that try to come and attack you and try to combat you each and every single day, such as myself. But just know that greater is our Father Yahuwah who is in you, greater is Yahuwah in us than he that is in the world. And remember, just remember this too, that our Father has given us the power to trample over every single enemy, and that includes the demons that may come about and that may come in our way. But what we have to do is continue to put our trust and our whole trust in our Father Yahuwah, and be still and know that our Father is Yahuwah Elohim, and he will do exactly what he said that he will do. Now, if you're looking for good scriptures that contains the name of our Father in him, then I highly recommend the Sefer Publishing Group, which is a comprehensive restoration of sacred scripture that's written in the English language. Now, the Sefer not only includes different books that were originally taken out of scripture, including Enoch and Jubilees and many other books, but did you know that the Sefer also includes the names of our Father Yahuwah, our Messiah Yahusha, and the Ruach HaKadosh, which is commonly known as the set-apart spirit, but it even restores the Aleph Tav 9,837 times, which have previously been omitted in other English translations. But did you also know that it restores an accurate order to the books as they were originally written, and even includes a Hebrew to English chart of the most common names and places that are found in Scripture, not to mention transliterations of over 3,100 Hebrew names without substitution, as well as different charts and maps and different things that can help you on your spiritual walk and journey, including if you would like to learn Hebrew, among many more. Now, what's good about this week and this week too, and within the month, is that the Sefer Publishing Group is doing a 20% off special because of the fall feast, and you can get 20% off your purchase, no coupon code needed. And we know that the feast days, the fall feasts, are right around the corner, and Yahuwah willing, I'm going to be talking more about each feast day in the Scriptures Often Ignored per week, so definitely stay tuned to that. But hopefully this has helped you on your spiritual walk and journey. This is Truth Unveiled here, saying shalom.